Okay. And talk about everything going on in the gym today. Obviously, you're a pretty busy man. You've been hustling all day. We've seen you and I have been chatting since what, 7 o'clock this morning on different things going on. What's going on, team? TJ here with you. I've got Don Roberts of Fitness Solutions 24/7. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you, TJ.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
We are going to talk about, and forgive us, Facebook. This is going to be backwards. However, the book is The Wellness Toolbox. And I read this book. I found it incredibly enlightening. I think one thing that stood out to me, by the way, Don wrote it. One of the things that stood out to me the most is how you did, and you saw I wrote this, you did an excellent job of taking the science side of things and applying it to how it is best used for your own clients and in personal experiences.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your coming to Durango, and then maybe a little bit about that book, and we'll dig deeper.
Yeah, you bet. So my name's Don Roberts. As TJ said, Wellness Toolbox. I've been in town since 1985. Actually came here for college at Fort Lewis College and got my degree in business. So it wasn't in exercise science, actually.
Yeah.
But it always really been enthralled by fitness and nutrition. And after I got out of college, did some various jobs, was playing actually in a band and doing some different sales jobs and things, and was fortunate enough to take over as a trainer at an old gym. It's where Chimayo Restaurant is in downtown now, called Main Street Gym. And got my feet wet there, and then someone that I had worked with before at Nissan, Economy Nissan here in town, that gym was going out of business, and he asked me to be the general manager and head trainer. Mm-hmm. And I said, what, are you kidding? Of course I will.
Yeah.
Anyway, fast forward, and then worked at a gym called Flexer's Gym for 9 years. And then when the rec center started here, we lost a lot of business, went out of business, and it's a wonderful facility, but and so I decided to reinvent myself, and just through business practices and whatnot, I decided I'm gonna go out on my own. I'm gonna do a 24-hour gym, and that's what I did. So I started that in 2002. So we're in our 17th year of that.
And you weren't here when you first. Were you? When did you first get here to this location?
Yeah. So in 2002 we opened up underneath where Vitamin Cottage is.
Okay.
So where Durango Martial Arts is.
Okay.
And this used to be an old restaurant called K-Bob's, and it became available, that would have been like 2007, and I'd been looking for 4 years actually.
Okay. And so even when you were there, you were actively scouting?
I was. I knew there wasn't, I knew there just wasn't a future in that building, and it had a lot of issues. I was fortunate that I had good rent, which allowed me to be here, really. But there were a lot of plumbing problems and parking problems and things that I won't get into.
He talks about this a little bit in the book, so quick plug, that story is in here of how you ended up having to very quickly make an overnight escape before everything got destroyed pretty much, right? So that whole story is amazing.
Yeah, there's some pretty crazy stuff in there with floods and fire, and then just the move and everything was pretty intense. But we love it out here, and it's from all the windows to tons of parking and great visibility off the frontage road. But yeah, we basically moved in here in August of 2008, and it's a good spot.
Excellent. So let's talk about. There's a couple things that stood out in the book. One thing, and I didn't know this about you, is that you've done a couple bodybuilding competitions, and I've always seen training for bodybuilding as something very different than training for a lot of things I train for, which are sports events, for lack of a better. I don't want to say bodybuilding is not a sport. It is. It's a science. It's but on that other side, training football players, training athletes on that realm of things. How do you see the difference there in developing a training program?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, there's some crossover there, and being an athlete. Just high school. I wasn't collegiate or pro, but I played a handful of sports. I think the biggest thing would be volume, because the more volume you're doing, in my opinion,
on the bodybuilding side.
On the bodybuilding side, exactly, you will tend to get more hypertrophy or more muscle growth. And So that's one of the biggest things, and almost more of a mind-muscle connection of maybe even a slower, more controlled fashion, some shorter rest periods. Whereas with an athlete, maybe you're looking at more explosiveness, more power, not doing as many sets.
Yeah.
Maybe some longer rest periods. So, yeah, and not always, but sometimes with the bodybuilding, you tend to get into more isolated movements. But yeah, they're both great, and I've done both for myself. And the contests I've done, I've only done 3, and they were, one was basically 20 years ago, and a couple of them 10 years ago or so. They were natural shows that were, you know, unfortunately in the bodybuilding world, there's a lot of people doing drugs.
So yeah, real quick, if you don't know the difference, when somebody says they're a natural bodybuilder, generally they're a bit more stringent on the testing, correct, for the competitors. Whereas in a lot of bodybuilding shows, it's not necessarily frowned upon to use a bit of the performance enhancement type of stuff to get bigger. So there is a difference there, and you can see a difference in people physically.
It's amazing. I used to think, I was naive enough to believe, 20 to 30 years ago that, if you ate right and you really trained hard, you got proper rest and everything, no, these guys are, I usually am about 180 pounds, used to be maybe 190, but when I cut down for bodybuilding, I was about 170. Well, the guys in my class were in that range, but you get into some of these guys that are in the pros that aren't being drug tested, they might weigh 250, 270 at my height. Yeah. And they have low body fat, and so it's obvious. It's just
all that, right here is just huge.
It's pretty sad. It is what it is.
If you look at people, not to say that Arnold was clean or anything like that, but if you look at how it was done back then, and then you look at now and the amount of growth hormone and other things added, you'll even notice that a lot of these guys have a gut.
They've got that really protruded, like, rectus abdominis. It's really weird.
It's not a great looking. I don't think it's good. I think I like the physique athletes.
Yeah, that classic
a bit better.
Physique.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing, I've done a couple bodybuilding type, just to drive this home real quick, because I don't think people understand this sometimes. I've done a couple bodybuilding workouts with some buddies who competed overseas when I was living overseas, and I've always been more of a, pick up heavy things, move fast, but not go for that hypertrophy of those lots of reps at a lighter weight. And I'll tell you, team, 20 pounds, 10 pounds on a dumbbell, and your arms your shoulders want to fall off. I mean, it is a different kind of pain cave that you go into with the bodybuilding.
It is, somebody that I trained with, Dave, for a number of years, almost 10 years, we used to joke, we used to really alternate between, and as when you read in the book, I'm a big fan of rotating between heavy, light, and medium, actually. And we would tend to go, and that's a relative term, of course, or term.
Whatever that is for you.
Exactly. And so those higher rep days were way harder than those lower rep days.
No, absolutely. Working up to heavy singles is a fun thing to do, but if you're doing, just a ton of curls or even a ton of deadlifts or something like that at a lighter weight, it breaks you down.
And for me, especially doing squats and split squats and things like that, something that's going to involve a lot more oxygen debt. It's intense.
That's the pukey feeling you get, guys. That is absolutely it. So let's talk real quick about some of the myths that you bust in your book. There's some good ones. I think one that stands out to me, and it just jumped out to me because I see it a lot, is a lot of times for women, they're afraid to pick up heavy weights because they're under the impression that what?
Oh yeah, they're going to get big and bulky like a guy. Right? And it's just not so. It unfortunately, whether it's been perpetuated through magazines or books or just random information that's out there.
You guys can come on in. We're just
Don't mind us.
We're in the middle of a gym, guys, so we apologize.
And so what tends to end up happening is, or that maybe they have had a few of those workouts and they get a little bit of that short-term muscle pump, and they think, it's going to be with them for this long period of time, and in reality it lasts
couple hours.
Maybe 2 hours at the most. Yeah, I was going to say maybe not, 60, 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But if they can truly wrap their head around the science that shows that they're going to get stronger and leaner, it's fantastic, and it's so empowering, as you well know.
Yeah.
That it can just open doors to things you just can't believe, mentally and physically. So
what I find with this along these lines, and I think you talk about this a little bit, when you break down, let's talk about lifting weights versus kind of like the cardio steady state thing that a lot of women in particular think that's the better way to go. When you're lifting the weights, you're breaking muscle. And for the next few days, your body is healing, and that healing process is burning calories. So when you're doing the cardio, you burn calories then.
Yep.
But when you do the weightlifting and you're picking up and putting down heavy things, all of a sudden you're burning calories after the fact, and it carries with you a little longer, which I think is an absolutely wonderful way to train. And you should do both, of course. It's not just a one or the other kind of thing.
Absolutely, and there is merit to steady state, if you want to call it cardio. I like to do it myself, partly as a recovery,
just to move.
Yeah, and there's a lot of some of the neurogenesis that goes on, which building neurons in the brain, and I mean it's wonderful. But from more bang for your buck, that shorter, intense cardio. Again, if your knees can handle it and whatnot. But the weight training, I mean, we're talking, for 48 hours or so, especially if you're doing those big compound movements.
Yeah, squats, deadlifts. So when he says compound movements, he's talking about you're moving more than just, that little hinge in your arm with a bicep curl. You're a full squat, a full deadlift, even a push-up or a pull-up. You've got a whole lot of body going on for that movement. And that's a game changer. Let's talk about a myth that you cover in your book that you just don't see die. Because I've seen some, there's an ebb and flow, right? But what is the one that's just, it doesn't die? You just can't seem to get people to get it out of their head.
Oh, goodness. I guess, well, definitely from a nutritional standpoint is that saturated fat is bad for us.
Yeah.
Because that's what we've been told for, 50, 60, 70 years. And so there is just a ton of, and you're going to find research, just be careful with all of your research, obviously. Where's it coming from? But it's just not so. And of course we want to find good, clean, quality product.
Avocados, nuts. I mean, you get a lot of these different.
Yeah, and even the meats, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Even, good grass-fed beef, and eggs and things like that. It's more about where you're getting it from. Is it an organic source, which I know is more expensive, but, unless you want to take in those pesticides and herbicides and all the junk, or take in those hormones that animal was taking in, I really encourage people to spend a little bit more. But that's, that's one of them. Oh my gosh, there's so many. I mean, there's 80 in the book.
Well, let's dive into this real quick, because I do have one question after this, but I like where you're going with this. When it comes to people, there was this thing that happened in the 80s where all of a sudden it came out that fat was really bad for you. Saturated, not unsaturated, what have you. Fat was the devil, right? And
that's going to make you fat.
Fat's going to make you fat, right? So what did they do? Like the best example is Snackwells, those cookies, right?
Oh, sure.
So they would sell everything that was fat free. Unfortunately, you still have to add something when you take something away. And what you took away, when you took away fat, you added sugar. And all of a sudden, people kind of started blowing up like balloons, didn't they?
Oh, not only did they start getting fatter, we saw an increase in, and have ever since, diabetes, arthritis, cancer. I mean, we could go on and on, but the bottom line, and I'm a big anti-sugar guy, as you probably know by now, but is that we're not intended to take that in, and it's super cheap. Sugar industry hit a lot of data. Just as the cigarette industry hit a lot of data. I mean, I personally believe that
it's super cheap and is government subsidized. That high fructose corn syrup. Is they literally, that is the welfare state of America. They subsidize that. It's super cheap. They put it in everything, and it's something your body's not designed, like you said, to break down.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, we're dealing with money, right? And I could go down a tangent with pharmaceuticals and get into the...
It is true. If you follow the money in a lot of these things, you see a lot of issues.
And who did, unfortunately, a lot of those people pay to have the research done. So if there's a particular lobbyist or special interest group, and then you read it and go, oh, it's fine. Well, you got to dig a little deeper and see where the science came from.
Absolutely. I like to go to like PubMed.com for a lot of my studies, and even then, you still have to look, and you have to see. And sometimes they're very open about it. They'll say this was supported by Gatorade, i.e., Coca-Cola, and they're not even hiding it, which may be okay. However, you need to be aware of that when those kinds of things happen. One last thing I want to add to that before we move to my last question is whenever they deem as in the health, wellness industry, what have you, deem something to be bad for you. In the 80s, it was fat. In the 90s, it was still that. They're replacing it with something else. And I think right now, for a lot of people, except for those dealing with celiac and other digestion issues, that's the gluten craze right now. And you have to be careful just because something says gluten-free, that doesn't equate to healthy. You can have a gluten-free Snickers, right? I mean, so be cognizant of that when you're at the grocery store. Don't buy that thing that says gluten-free if it's still a sweet, sugary thing, because that's not good for you.
No, it's true, and I'm a big fan of health food stores, but we could go into any health food store in the nation, and I can show you a lot of products that I wouldn't want you eating because they still have a ton of sugar.
They're sugar bombs, yeah.
And a lot of those gluten-free foods are. There's a handful of things that are, and I am a fan of gluten-free, but I talk about that, as you know.
You
in
do,
the book, that don't think going gluten-free is going to, be this end-all to your weight loss problems, because if you're not managing those quick-absorbing carbohydrates, which it is, you're still going to have problems. So those gluten-free muffins, gluten-free pancakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
remember, there are people that genuinely have issues with this, and with issues with gluten, whether it's celiac or other issues. It's no joke. So we're not trying to belittle that. Just be aware that doesn't equate to healthy.
Yeah,
that's the best way to put it. So I've got one more question for you. Like I told you, I do try to keep these a little bit short in the 20-minute range, and it is on the nutrition side of things. You talk a lot in your book, and I don't even know what this is. So first you have to tell me what it is, and then we'll get into the story. You talk a lot in the book about backstrap molasses, okay? And how you love it as a source of, correct me if I'm wrong, just kind of it's like a smooth energy that you get out of it. Instead of those like goo packs and things like that are just sugar bombs. Again, you really enjoy this, and you had recommended it for somebody who was doing a big event. Do you mind telling us that story?
Yeah. So blackstrap molasses is an interesting product that's been around, and it is actually a byproduct of sugar. And yes, there is sugar in it, but it's ironically a fairly low to moderate absorption rate.
Okay.
So to get to your point on the story, this was, probably 20-ish years ago. A gentleman that I was training at the time, I was in either probably my early 30s, and he was in his mid 50s. Was training for the Iron Horse here. And
real quick, if you don't know what the Iron Horse is, I think we talked about it last week. It is a race that starts in Durango, and you pedal to Silverton, and you race a train essentially. Some do, and you pass two very large mountain passes. You're starting around 6,000 feet. At one point, you're around 12,000 feet above sea level. So it is a massive undertaking. It's about 50 miles long.
Yeah, and so I haven't done it, but I've worked with a handful of people that have. But anyway, I do some interesting things in the nutritional field. I do a lot of nutritional training as well as personal training. But anyway, as part of his eating plan, I had him doing blackstrap molasses. And you probably don't want to hear the whole story.
No, it is in the book, but I think the story is absolutely hilarious.
So I'm not going to tell you guys the whole story, but I'll just tell you more about blackstrap molasses. It's relatively inexpensive. A tablespoon of it has twice as much potassium as a banana. And bananas tend to be this, end-all, be-all to potassium. But blackstrap molasses and yams and avocado and broccoli and salmon and figs and all these foods have a lot more potassium in them, and those potassium is such an important mineral. I mean, it's an electrolyte, right?
Yeah.
And so
especially for cramping, things like that. Yeah.
It's going to allow you to have better muscle control, better bone health. It's going to help prevent cramping. It can give you more energy. You're providing that cell with more power, so to speak. And Yeah, so it's an interesting product. I'll let you read the story.
This is my final plug for the book before we close this out, guys. First off, you have to read the whole book because it's towards the end of the book, I believe. It's a little
in the latter part.
Yeah.
First part's fitness. First half's fitness. Second half's
Yeah,
nutrition.
we get it. He gets into some great stories, and this one, it actually had me in tears. It was really good. So I was laughing pretty hard in a funny way. It was a really good story. So, Don, I greatly appreciate you being on again.
My pleasure,
We're here
TJ.
at Fitness Solutions 24/7. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'll
Thanks
see you
for having
soon.
me. All
Yeah.
right.
All right.